Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then hi, my name's Hannah, and today I'm going to be telling you all about the Minoans. Just before we jump into the video, I want to say a massive thank you to all the positive messages I've had about my makeup and myths video the other week. I was very nervous about doing it, but I'm so glad that I pushed myself out of my comfort zone because you guys have just been like overwhelmingly supportive, and I just want to say thank you. So, who are the Minoans? Let me tell you. The Minoans were an ancient Greek people that inhabited. Why can't I say inhabited? The Minoans were an ancient Greek people that inhabited modern-day Crete and Santorini, then called Thera, from about 3000 to 1100 BC. If you haven't heard of the Minoans, here's probably why. The Minoans wrote in a script called Linear A, which at the moment is undeciphered. One thing that we do know about the Minoans is that they were extensive traders. We know that they traded with civilizations in Egypt, the Near East, and mainland Greece. We know that they traded in art and ceramics, but we also know that they mass-produced textiles. I've actually just submitted last week a project that I did all about Minoan textiles, so if you want me to do more of an in-depth video on their fashion and their clothes, then I would be happy to do that because it's really interesting. Speaking of Minoan textiles, their colours were vibrant and varied, and they were decorated with beading and with embroidery. And I'll insert a couple images that we have from clothing in frescoes, which we can look at and try and identify weaving techniques and the kind of dyes they used. We know that they had dyeing workshops, and I'll insert the name of one here because I'm not even going to try and butcher that. But these places had rock-cut vats which would be used with hot water and coloured dyes to soak woolen garments or just woolen thread in, which would then be used to weave vibrant clothes. One of the most striking colours in Minoan textiles is purple. Purple's had a huge history with its links to royalty and with wealth, purely because it was expensive to make. The Minoans made purple dye by catching sort of snails from the sea, which sounds kind of gross, and we do know that these places smelt, but they would catch these snails and remove a gland in them that produced the colours, because they had purple like shells and stuff, and I'll insert a picture here, but basically they extracted these glands and cut them up and put them in boiling water, and it released all the colours. And yeah, that's how they did that. They're called murex snails, and there were different species that produced different colours, and we know from Pliny the Elder that later on this technique was used, and they used urine to dilute the colours and to get a pretty lavender colour, which again is pretty gross. We also know that if they wanted an even brighter colour, that they would double dye, so they would double dip them, do it 2 separate times. So if any of you are big art history nerds like I am, I would definitely recommend this book. So this is a book all about like Aegean art and architecture. It's from the Oxford History of Art series, and it just shows you really beautiful examples of Minoan art. This is a very famous mosaic from the Queen's Megaron at the palace at Knossos, and it shows dolphins, but potentially it could have been put in the wrong place because it was reconstructed, which is a whole other issue, reconstructions in archaeological sites, and I would love to do a video exploring that. If you'd want me to, let me know down below. But this moves on nicely to the idea of religion in Minoan civilization. Sir Arthur Evans, who was a primary archaeologist at the Palace of Knossos in the early 20th century, has hypothesized that the Minoans only really worshipped a single sort of Mother Earth fertility goddess. We have dubbed her the snake goddess because of her depictions in art and figurines. So this is a really good book. I got it for my first year module. It was compulsory. It talks about Greece and the ancient world and different civilizations, so the Athenians, the Spartans, the Mycenaeans, the Minoans, and it's really good. But they have a chapter on the Minoans, and here you can see the snake goddess. She's holding a snake in each hand. She's got her breasts exposed, which was typical of Minoan female dress, and a tiered skirt with an apron. But yeah, we really don't actually know whether she was a single deity or whether this is potentially just a depiction of her priestesses. We just don't know until Linear A is deciphered. The capital city of Minoan civilization was the palace at Knossos on Crete. Last term, my lecturer provided us with a definition of a Minoan palace, which I'm going to share with you. She writes that a Minoan palace is a large building complex of sophisticated construction that is the centre of religious, economic, and social life in a relative wide urban area, into which it was architecturally and functionally integrated. Now that definition is interesting because from the archaeology that we found, Minoan civilization was very communal. We can tell that farmers would have harvested their grain and they would have been deposited into kaloras, which were stone-lined pits in the palaces that would have been used to feed everyone. We have pottery at Phaistos that is indicative of huge communal feasting, whether it was from parties or to provide at festivals, or whether they really did just live communally. The palace at Knossos had a throne room. I'll insert a picture here, but we're not sure that it actually was for a king and his queen, or whether it was a ruling class, or whether it was just sort of a high priest or high priestess. So we don't know whether the throne was just symbolic and used in ritual, or whether it was meant for a monarch. When looking at the Minoan palaces, there are two periods that we need to focus on. We have the Old Palace period and the New Palace period. In about 1700 BC, there was an earthquake or some natural disaster that destroyed the palaces. But instead of fleeing and rebuilding somewhere else, we can tell from the archaeological evidence that the palaces were not only rebuilt, but they were made even more monumental. We know that the Minoans worshipped bulls. They were sacred to them. They're depicted in hundreds of pieces of art, varying in medium, from pottery to sculpture to mosaics. Bull leaping was a huge part of Minoan culture, which is often misinterpreted as being a sport, when in reality it was more of a ritualistic thing. Earlier, when I said that the Minoans ruled until 1100 BC, I guess it was a little bit of a white lie. While the Minoans continued to exist until that time, their civilization began to collapse in about 1500–400 BC. It was at this time that there was a huge volcanic explosion on Santorini that would have had detrimental effects to the civilization on Crete. There's a lot of debate in the scholarship about this, there's a lot of extreme opinions, and it very well could have played a part, but I'm not convinced that it was the only reason. There is also a theory that the Minoans were conquered by the Mycenaeans, but this really isn't an area that I'm very well educated on, and I would definitely encourage you to figure it out for yourself and do more reading if you're interested. It's clear to me that the Minoans were an incredibly sophisticated civilization who, in no doubt, paved the way for the golden age of Greece. They had extensive trade, sophisticated architecture, beautiful art, and plenty more interesting things. And no doubt we'll learn even more interesting things about them once Linear A is finally deciphered. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!